The weird, very specific fantasy of using ranged weapons close up is one that I think kind of hits just right for a lot of D&D players and a lot of game enjoyers in general, video or tabletop. And the best way to do that in D&D at the moment, at least in terms of flavor wise, would be to use the Gunslinger class from Valda's Spire of Secrets, which obviously got added to D&D Beyond a few months ago, which I did a review to, which I'll link in the description. The idea of using two pistols to dance around your foes is just a lot of fun, and it's one which you can pretty fully realize in D&D now, and it's also one which I think meshes really well with crit fishing. So that's what we're going to build today. This is Keanu Gunfu, our gunslinger of choice. We are kicking off with the archery fighting style to make sure that we've got a better chance to hit, because that's pretty important. Weapon mastery wise, we've taken the pistol for Vex. If you want to use the Valdaspire Secrets weapons, your best bet here is the handgun, but the handgun has the firearm property, which means that you don't add your ability modifiers to it at all, and it's 2d4 instead of 1d10. So while your damage might be slightly more consistent, it won't be as high potentially, and you're also not going to be adding a modifier, which is obviously a big deal. With the way that we're going to be playing this build most of the time, you're going to be using your action to do one attack and then your bonus action to do another, albeit without the damage modifier on that, but that's not the end of the world. And to begin with, we'll be dancing around enemies from 10 feet away, ideally, to avoid the disadvantage that melee range kind of forces upon us. One really cool thing about the Gunslinger class is that it gives us advantage on our initiative rolls and lets us draw or stow two weapons at once, basically, so we can get two pistols out. In terms of background, I've gone for criminal because I really like the idea of having the alert feat. You could also go for the lucky feat, which is probably the correct choice if you're crit fishing, but I like going first and with an advantage, and with advantage on your roll because of the class and better score on your initiative rolls because of this. You currently have a +5 to your initiative rolls and advantage on it, which is really strong. Again, lucky is the correct choice if you want to go for crit fishing, but that's a whole other thing. It's not a whole other thing. We've gone for a boost to our dex and our con, which means that our stats to begin with, we'll look at species in a second, are 8, 17, 16, 8, 10, 14. We've bumped charisma here because of the subclass we're going to choose, as we will get to, and also it kind of fits the whole gunslinger thing in my head. Species wise, we've gone for elf because we're going to be taking elven accuracy, obviously, if we're doing crit fishing. I've also gone for wood elf so that we get a slight boost to our movement speed, and we can take long strider and pass without trace later on as well, which is great. Now then, at level 1, we'll be doing an average of 14 damage. The first attack we do is 1d10 plus 3, which is 8.5 damage, and then the bonus action is 5.5 because it's just the d10 itself. This is pretty good. In terms of crit chance, we have an overall crit chance of 14% at the moment, which at level 1 is pretty good, with more or less a 10% crit chance on that bonus action thanks to the Vex mastery property, which gives us advantage. Things immediately go kind of crazy. Things immediately get substantially better at level 2 because we get critical shot, which lets us score a crit on a 19 or 20. So while our baseline damage doesn't change at all here, our crit chance for per turn jumps up to 27% with a 19% crit chance on that bonus action attack, which is really solid at level 2. We also got risk dice, but a lot of these use your bonus action to utilize, but it gives you a bit more flexibility in how you're playing the class, which is going to be relevant when you're actually playing this. Level 3, we get the subclass. There, weirdly, isn't a subclass that really fits this concept, which is super strange. The Deadeye gets the Eagle Eye maneuver, which lets you add a risk die to your attack roll if you miss, which is nice. It actually doesn't say if you miss. You get the Eagle Eye maneuver, which lets you add a risk die to your attack roll when you miss, which is good because that means we can always get that first attack in. But generally, it's intended for a more sniper-based playstyle, which isn't what we're going for. The High Roller is an incredibly fun one, and it lets you do the Liar's Dice maneuver, which lets you potentially double your damage. But that's a GM-player interaction, which, while I absolutely do genuinely adore it, is hard to quantify when doing a build guide. You've then got the Spellslinger, the Trick Shot, and the White Hat, which are all, again, fun, but not really what we're going for. What we're going to go for here is the Secret Agent subclass, which gives us a big boost to our general roleplay performance because it gives us proficiency in a bunch of skills that are relevant to that, which is lovely, as well as skill with the disguise kit, which is just a lot of fun. It also gives us a concealed cantrip concealed shot cantrip, which lets us hide our weapon. Niche, but it's there, and it gives us the parting shot maneuver in case we need to get out. The main feature we want for this is later on, but we will get to that. Level 4 is the first time we're going to be taking anything that kind of impacts our actual damage output. We are sort of forced to take the gunner feat here if we want to ignore the loading property, which means that we can attack twice with the pistols, because otherwise we can't. And it also means that being within melee range of a creature doesn't impose a disadvantage. This one's kind of forced. It gives us a slight bump to our damage of 1 point as well, which means that we go up from 14 to 15 damage average. Same crit chance for now, but that is about to change. This one's sort of slow to begin with, but it does pick up pretty quickly. Level 5, we get 2 really cool features. We get extra attack, which is obviously good. Extra attack means we're doing an extra standard attack, so we're doing now 2 attacks of the 9.5 average damage, 1 attack of the 5.5 damage, which means doing 24.5 average damage now. More importantly, it raises our total crit chance of 1 crit at least to 41%, with a 19% chance to crit on the extra attack and the bonus action attack, which is decent. Along with that, it gives us the gut shot ability, which is when you crit a large or smaller creature with a range attack using a weapon, the projectile lodges itself in the creature, and for a minute or until they use an attack to dislodge the projectile, the speed is halved and it has disadvantage on attack rolls. If we're going to be critting a lot, and that is obviously the aim here, then that's going to be really, really helpful. Level 6, we get Fieldcraft, which is our second subclass ability. It lets us treat any deception or rolls as a 10 at the very least, which is great. And it also lets us change our outfit as a bonus action. It's super fun. It's really not relevant to what we're doing, but I promise it's going to be relevant later on. I swear. This does not change the stats in the slightest in terms of damage though. Level 7, we get Evasion, which again doesn't change our damage, but it does improve our survivability. It means we take half damage if we don't succeed in a dex save, and we take no damage whatsoever if we do succeed, which is absolutely incredible. Just ask any monk or rogue player. We are going up to level 8 now, and we are taking, of course, the Elven Accuracy feat. This lets us bump our dexterity up to 19, which doesn't give us a boost in damage from that directly, but it means that we roll with super advantage. So whenever we have advantage on a roll now, we'll roll 3 die instead of 2. This bumps our overall crit chance from 41% to 52%, which means that we are more likely to crit than not at this point. And it also means that instead of a 19% chance of critting on the extra and bonus attack, which is very good. You might be thinking, well, that's good, but what if we could crit more? And I've got good news for you, friends, because you also get the buffed version of critical shot at level 9, which is where we now are. This allows you to crit on an 18 to 20. This means that your standard chance to crit with your first attack is 15%, which is already very strong. Just nothing. You don't have to do anything for that. That's just as it is. We have super advantage though. This pushes our crit chance up to 68% per turn, with a 38% chance to crit on both the extra attack and the bonus attack, which is absolutely sublime, obviously. Level 10, we get another weapon mastery. It doesn't matter. We're just using pistols. We also get the exit strategy subclass feature, which allows us to take a reaction to avoid taking damage potentially, which is pretty useful. Level 11 gives us another boost to our damage. It reads, the feature is called Overkill, and it reads, when you deal damage with a ranged weapon that doesn't add your ability modifier to the roll, you can add your ability modifier nevertheless. If you already did add your ability modifier to the damage, the target takes 1d8 extra damage of the weapon's type. That's absolutely amazing. This does 2 things for us at this level. It means that we get to add a d8 to our action attacks, so that's 2 of them, which means that we're getting an extra 9 points of damage on average. But it also means that we can add our ability modifier now to our bonus action attack, because we're not already doing so, which means we're also getting another 4 points on damage on top of that. This means that our average damage jumps up from 24.5 to 37.5, although with a crit chance of 68% overall and 38% still on the second 2 attacks. That's all very good stuff. Moving to level 12, and we have options here. I think your best options here are Piercer, which allows you to boost your dex to 20 and also allows you to reroll damage when you deal damage with a piercing weapon, which our pistol is, and also means that when we crit, we can roll an extra damage die to determine the extra damage. This potentially gives you a huge boost in your crits, but it doesn't make our crits more consistent, which is what I want to do. You could take the Piercer feat now if you wanted to, but you could also go for the other option. The other option, however, is a little DM dependent. Focused Critical is a feat from the Valdaspira Secrets player pack and from the Gunslinger class, and it means that you can improve your dexterity to 20, which is what we're doing either way. But it also means that when you roll an attack with weapons or unarmed strikes, you can score a crit on a 19 or 20. I would let this stack with the other features that you've got, which means that at this point you could crit on a 17 to 20. It is 100% up to you and your DM as to which one of these you would be taking at this point. If the Focus Critical doesn't work for you, take the Piercer feat, 100%. If the Focus Critical does work for you, take the Focus Critical feat. I would say, because I want to be critting more. That's kind of our focus here. I appreciate both sides of the argument on this one. Neither of them say that they actively changed the thing. It just says it's a 19 or 20, so there you are. But I personally interpret that as meaning that it improves your range by 1. Talk to your DM about this. Piercer is still a fantastic feat, and that might actually be a bigger damage boost, but this boosts our crit chance. Because our ability modifier is now 5 instead of 4, we're doing 30 damage on average with our first 2 attacks, and 9.5 damage on average with our bonus action attack. This puts our average damage up to 39.5, which is pretty decent, but it also means that our crit chance starts up to 79% chance overall, and 49% per extra attack or bonus attack, which is really high, and I am here for it. Level 13 just sort of stops us passing out once per rest, which is, nice. Level 14 is the biggest damage boost to our play, basically. We get License to Kill, which means that whenever we deal damage with a ranged weapon, which is obviously what we're using, you can expend either 1 or 2 of your risk die and add them to the damage roll. If you roll the highest number on one of these, you can roll it again without expending it, and you can keep doing that as many times as that happens. The maximum number of risk die you can add is equal to your proficiency bonus. So you can't do it forever, but you can keep doing it for a couple, right? Which is great. Your risk die at this point, you have 6d10. We are doing 3 attacks per round, so you can add 2 to every attack you're doing on the first round, and that's what the damage I'm looking at the moment. This means that our attacks are doing 3d10 plus 1d8 plus ability mod. The first ones, and then the bonus action is doing 3d10s plus ability mod, which is all pretty solid. It means that our damage jumps up from 39.5 to 72.5 with the same 79% chance to crit per turn and 49% chance to crit on both the extra and bonus actions. That's all really good stuff. Level 15, we get Dire Gambit, which means that we get to gain an expended risk die back when we roll initiative or score a critical hit. As we're critting quite a lot, this should give us a chance to crit pretty much every single turn and therefore get at least 1 die back every single turn. If you were to reduce the number of die you're adding to each damage roll to just 1, you could theoretically keep that going for the entire combat, which is excellent. That is hard to calculate it's impossible to calculate because I can't say how often you're definitely going to crit, because even with a 49% chance you might not crit. That's how my luck works. Anyway, level 16, we're already at 20 dexterity, which means I don't want to take the Piercer feat. You could take the Focus Critical feat as well. Maybe you just put 1 dex less in your dex to begin with the build, and that's something you could definitely do and make work. If that is the case, you take the Piercer or the Focus Critical feat here. If not, you can just take an ASI. I'm just going to bump our con, so we've got more health because we're in close range combat. The damage thing to do would be to take the Piercer or Focus Critical, depending on which one you took at the last level, and that obviously boosts our damage, but I'm not going to do calcs with that in mind. I'm just letting you all know. This means that our damage does not go up here, but this is not the final level of the build. The final level of the build is 17, and at 17, our crits get even better, so we can now crit from a 16 to 20, assuming the Focus Critical thing stacks. This means that while our damage is still 72.5%, our overall crit chance is 87%. We have an 87% chance of critting once per turn, and on both the extra attack and the bonus attack, we have a 58% chance to critical hit, which means that you're more than likely doing 2 crits per turn. Which means that, theoretically, if you crit on 2 of those hits and they do the average damage, you would be adding an extra 46 damage or so to your turns. I didn't want to do the damage numbers assuming that you were going to crit. I wanted to do the baseline average damage because I think that's the most consistent way to do this. I don't think this is the highest damage build that I've done. I think both of the other builds that I've done are actually stronger in terms of general DPR. But I do think that this has, for just outlandishly strong turns, thanks to all the critical hits. And if you've got items which react on a crit, vicious weapons or things of that sort, or you've got better guns, frankly, the pistol is the base level one, right? If you can do beyond that, then you're going to be hitting a lot harder than the numbers I've given. And again, your crit chance could be even higher. I think this is a pretty entertaining build. The idea of getting into close quarters combat with an enemy and then still using your guns is just feels fun and silly and very Equilibrium-esque. Thank you, Keanu. And I think it could be an entertaining build to play. I do think it's a little wibbly at lower levels, but even at lower levels, you've still got a fairly decent chance of crit, which is lovely. But let me know what you think. Is crit fishing something you want to do? I know that these kind of builds can be popular, but is that how you want to play your game, or would you rather go for more consistent damage rather than the higher chance of crit? Let me know. Either way, that is the end of this build video. I do hope you enjoyed this. If you did, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.